York, 1 in 3 New Yorkers move in with family in order to keep a roof over their heads. Housing, the cost of living, among the very biggest concerns for people based on a recent survey.
So the People's Pulse did ask 3,000 New Yorkers about it, and the findings will shape the upcoming mayoral election. So here with more insight is Grace Rauh. She's the executive director of the 5 Boro Institute, which took the lead on this survey. Grace, great to see you. Welcome back.
Thank you.
So, the results of the survey didn't really come as a surprise when you look at some of the big issues. I'm sure they didn't for you either, right? Housing affordability, public safety. We've heard this time and time again. But what I thought was so interesting about the People's Pulse is you go on further to show how it's really impacting the lives of people. So what jumped out at you?
So, affordability, mental health, public safety, those were the big headlines from the results. And I want to focus on affordability because I think that cut across so many different questions. We know that the city has become less affordable for so many folks, but in our survey, we were really able to dig down and get some concrete examples about how that's showing up. So what does that mean? A third of New Yorkers telling us that they or a family member has struggled with food insecurity in the last few years, right? Just being able to eat, feed themselves. That's significant. Nearly half of New Yorkers told us that they have considered leaving New York, and they cited affordability, the high cost of living, housing, the cost of food, clothing, as the main reason why they've considered leaving the city. And the kicker to that, though, is that when we ask people, why didn't you leave the city? Why did you decide to stay? They said, I couldn't afford it.
I couldn't afford to move out,
right,
because it costs so much money. We want to look at the actual nitty-gritty numbers, so let's go ahead and put those up on the screen. 42% of New Yorkers say housing, the biggest financial burden, and it is for most people, right? Whether you have money or you don't have money. 78% say housing costs have gotten worse in recent years. 61% say it's hard for them to meet their basic needs, talking about food insecurity. 48% have considered leaving because they can't afford to stay. So the affordability, the crisis is shaping family dynamics as well, and dig into that.
Right. Well, so what we've seen is people are moving in with relatives in a way that perhaps they wouldn't have in years past to save money. So about a third of New Yorkers say they or someone they know have had to move in with a family member to save on rent, presumably, save on their housing costs, because we know housing is the biggest driver. And so that's just cutting across the way we live. It's changing our ability to enjoy New York and get the positive things out of the city that drew so many people here in the first place.
I'm just going to put a little addendum in there because I have a child at 22 years old, and what she was telling me is starting her first job. So many of her young colleagues don't move into the city. They can't afford to do it. They stay with their parents, so they're not even moving out and launching.
But also, Grace, the point of what you're saying about people moving in with each other is it becomes a bit of a dangerous situation, because what I'm hearing from some folks who are the younger generation is they're going to pile as many people into an apartment as possible to try to cut down the cost.
Right. They need to. We have a vacancy rate of about 1.4% or something that is insane. It is virtually impossible to get an apartment, let alone afford one. The cover story in New York Magazine this week was about how parents are subsidizing their children's lives, and just how extensive that is, because the city, it is impossible for a young person, really in particular, to be able to come here, get that first job. And New York historically has been a magnet for people who are at the beginning of their careers. They want to hustle. They want to build something. And this is where they come to do it. And that high cost of housing is a barrier.
That was a great read, by the way, in the New York Magazine. But I want to talk about the other big issue, which, again, was not a surprise when you look at it, about public safety and the mental health crisis. So many folks saying, yes, New York City does have a mental health crisis, and what can be done about it? The question I have for you, Grace, and you used to be on this side of things, reporting on it, and you were in the political world, right? So does this, like a survey like this, does it shape public policy, especially in a political year, either for Mayor Adams or for the candidates who could potentially become the next mayor?
It certainly should shape public policy. And really the goal of this project, which we embarked on with a number of foundations in the city, Brooklyn Org, New York Community Trust, Staten Island Foundation, and Altman Foundation, we set out to amplify the voices of New Yorkers in an election year. We wanted to make sure that the political discourse was not entirely focused on who's up, who's down, on what's happening in Washington. All of that is hugely important, but we wanted to make sure that the challenges that New Yorkers are facing every day were really centered in our political conversation during this election year and were focused on by the political candidates. We think that doing so will mean that more New Yorkers will come out to vote. We have abysmal voter turnout in this city. And so that's sort of on a high level, the purpose of this survey. But certainly when it comes to shaping public policy, we asked people about what interventions they wanted to see when it comes to mental health, homelessness, on the subway in particular. We asked them to rank them. The number one idea that got the most votes or the strongest feedback was expanding mental health and housing support, followed by more police presence on subways and platforms, followed by more outreach workers and social service workers in the subways, and then in fourth, involuntary commitment for people who can't care for themselves.
Yeah, and this is borne out by the numbers that came out of your survey. 77% of people said that they're not getting the care that they need. 68% of people avoid the subway because they're worried about their safety, right? And 40% have been impacted by subway crime. 40% have been impacted by subway crime. That is just huge as we're trying to funnel more people into the subways, get us back to pre-pandemic ridership levels, and as the MTA is asking for more money to create upgrades to get people onto the subways. How do these two things work together when they seem to be diametrically opposed at times?
Well, you know, on the question of impact of, you know, crime on the subways and in public spaces, the way we asked that question was, have you or someone you known either been a victim or witnessed a crime on the subway or in public space? That's why it's so high. But frankly, we wanted to get at that because the crime statistics only show a really narrow picture, right?
Correct.
Right, of a victim and of a specific incident. And when we are on a subway car and we see something happen, we're part of that story. We are part of that story. So we wanted to be able to capture kind of like the extent to which public safety concerns are affecting a much broader swath of New Yorkers than are reflected in the data.
All very interesting, Grace. We're out of time here. Where can people find the full survey if they want to take a look at it?
Sure. The survey's on our website, 5boro.nyc. We think of this as this is a public resource. We are sharing this with community groups that are holding candidate forums, with the candidates themselves, with New Yorkers. It's available to all, and we certainly hope and expect that it will continue to drive important conversations.
Yes, spur more action and also spur more people to get to the polls because our voter turnout rate is so low. Thank you so much.